Good afternoon. So, my name is George Alicio. I'm the Dean of the Weinberg Memorial Library and the Director of the Schemel Forum. And welcome to the fifth World Affairs Luncheon Seminar Series. Today, we find ourselves standing at a juncture where artificial intelligence has begun its creep into almost every facet of our lives. As we find ourselves amid this headlong dive into something that seems to have appeared with insufficient warning, we must also reflect on this technology and its implications. Of course, the promise of AI is immense, and its application extends beyond mere convenience. For instance, can we harness artificial intelligence potential for the greater good, possibly even for the safety and well-being of our communities? One possible application is to use AI to help decipher the criminal mind on a massive scale. At today's seminar, we have the privilege of hearing from someone who has played a pivotal role in pioneering forensic investigations. Dr. Ann Wolbert Burgess has a storied career, so storied, in fact, that she is the inspiration of a character on Netflix's series Mindhunter. Mindhunter is the name of it, yes. Her research in criminal justice spans criminal psychology, forensics, cyber crimes, victimology, and the assessment and treatment of trauma and abuse. After reading several online biographies, I can say without hesitation that I don't think it's possible to find someone more capable of connecting forensic science with an understanding of the human psyche, at least not outside of the real world, maybe in fiction. Her current focus on leveraging AI to analyze potential threats before they escalate provides a lens into how this new wave of technology can shape and hopefully better our societal frameworks. As we find ourselves on the cusp of an AI revolution, these insights are more than timely, they are critical. Please join me in welcoming a true trailblazer, Dr. Ann Wolbert Burgess.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much, and I very much enjoyed meeting some of you for lunch, and glad you're here. And I think we will, I hope, have an informative session. Now, here are some of the objectives or some of the questions that I hope to answer for you. How did I get into this area of studying serial killers? Sometimes they say, how's a nice girl like you studying these horrible people? What is profiling? Will we learn from the experts, the killers themselves? You're going to see some interviews with the actual killers. And what can we learn from the victims? I really come at this from the victim standpoint. And there's one case about a 7-year-old that I'll tell you about. Then how did serial killers lead to mass shooters and terrorism? How does artificial intelligence and machine learning fit into the picture? And how does AI fit into our culture? So I hope that we can look at all of these, obviously not very much in depth. And so if I don't, just read the book. Maybe you'll get some answers, not on the artificial intelligence because the book was written before that. So anyway, this is I always like to look at literature and the arts to see in history where we have been. And this goes way back, this whole problem of sexual violence. This is the rape of Sabine women. And I thought it was very fitting for what we're going through actually right now. And this is a very beautiful depiction, if you will, of what happens in war. The person that really wrote the best on this is Susan Brownmiller, Against Our Will. And she wrote about the same time that Linda Holmstrom and I were doing our study, and that was back in the early 70s. So that's how far back, at least, our research went. So we need to keep this in mind as we go through. Cases had always interested me, and perhaps in your own careers or your own fields, that there are certain cases that stick with you or become important. And for me, it was the Kitty Genovese case. And this was back in 1964 when this young 28-year-old woman who had built her way up to managing a bar was walking home one night from her car, and she realized that she was being, well, we assume she realized that she was being followed. And this man came up, assaulted her, and she screamed. And she screamed, and he ran off. But then he came back and he finished murdering her. And it was always an interesting thing of why did he come back? And he later said, after they caught him, that he knew nobody would do anything. So this was the beginning of the newspaper, the New York Times, I think, picked the story up. And they looked into it, and it had said all these people had responded. Well, they hadn't. So it's my first introduction to how you got to be really careful about what you read in the paper and think that it's really true. They actually found out that some people did, but no one came to her rescue, except the woman in the building who actually found her and was able to call the police, and she died on the way to, to the hospital. But at any rate, what's important about this case had to do with bystander intervention. In other words, and they've done studies on that, and they have found people won't respond if they think somebody else has responded. And that's really an interesting observation from the research arena. But the other important thing from this case, it was the genesis of 911. When they went to call the police in those days, you had to dial, they had a dial thing, dial it. You get some operator, you'd say, I need the police, and that could take a lot of time. So in their wisdom, this is when 911 was actually started. So I found that very important. My purpose in this was I later found out that Mosley, who was the man that was caught, was a serial killer. He had gotten away with 2 prior murders, and this was his 3rd. And in the definition of a serial killer, it used to be 3, now they cut it back to 2. But at any rate, I realized how he had said, he was just out, roaming around. That's not true either. He had really had her under surveillance. He knew her schedule. She took the same train home every night and got out, parked her car. So that whole concept of interrupting any ritualistic behavior is really important if you think that you're in any danger, because the killers out there or the criminals out there are really watching, and they have the upper hand. He also, I found out, he had lived in a house across from where she lived. So he really had developed, I'm sure, in his own mind about the fantasy of what he was going to do. And he carried it out. Unfortunately, it was successful. But at any rate, that was an important case for me. I was a graduate student back then, but I always remember, and I usually always start with the Kitty Genovese case. Unfortunately, the police were more interested in the fact that she had a girlfriend than in trying to find them. They spent a lot of time and even arrested the girlfriend, thinking that she might have had something to do with it. So other things that come out, for me, this is a very important case that I like to always tell my students. So how do I get into the picture? Well, I'm minding my own business at Boston College, just, doing my teaching and so forth, when a sociologist, Linda Holmstrom, approaches me and says that she's ready to look at a topic for research. Now, Linda, I was very impressed with Linda because she had just finished her dissertation on 2-career family. Can you believe that? That was a new concept in that time, that women would get out and work in the workforce. But even more important, she got it written up in the Wall Street Journal. So again, I thought, she's got something I better learn about. Anyway, so she liked to do women's issues. She knew that this was going to be a big issue, sexual violence, rapes, all that was going to be a new issue, because she was going to these consciousness raising groups, and these were where women would gather together and talk about things that they never had talked about before. And of course, this was one of them. Sexual violence was one of them. So where were we at that? Going the wrong way. So where were we at that time? We were both new assistant professors at Boston College. She was going to these sessions, and she wanted to study rape victims, but she couldn't find any. Now, she didn't tell me that. It's always interesting how you find things out later on. But she figured that maybe I would know where rape victims. Well, where did I know where rape victims went? I said, well, they probably go to hospitals, right? I mean, if they were injured, they must go to hospitals. I sent letters. In those days, you had to type out and write a letter, put it in an envelope, and mail it to all of the major hospitals in the Boston area, of which there are many. Brigham, Mass General, Beth Israel. We have today, very, very strong hospitals. And I sent them to the directors of nursing thinking, nursing's going to help me. I'm a nurse, they'll help me with my finding victims. Nothing until I started calling them on the phone. I said, did you get my letter? And what they told me is they had to check it out with medicine. I said, check it out with medicine. What do doctors have to do with this? This is a nursing. No. So, however, there was one hospital I hadn't looked into. That was Boston City Hospital. And when I learned that my psychiatric nursing instructor from Boston University, where I had graduated, was now the executive nursing director, I thought, I'll try Annie Hargreaves. So I didn't send a letter. I made a phone call. And the secretary said, I'll check. Came back and said, no, she's not in. Well, you knew darn well she was in, right? So I said, why don't you try asking her if she'll take a phone call from Penny Wolbert? I had married by then, had changed my name, was going by Ann Burgess, and of course Annie took the call. And she said, she knew my work. She said, I'm sure nobody's doing anything for victims. You may come. And that was really the start of my having access for a 1-year period. Linda Holmstrom and I, every single time there was a call coming into Boston City Hospital, got in our cars. And of course, it's mostly like 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. We were both teaching full time. I had just had my 4th child. Linda was just pregnant, which is another story when the head of OB got me aside and said, isn't your partner pregnant? She's like 7 months pregnant. And I said, well, how observant of you. He said to me, I thought you were nuns from Boston College. I see the headlines, right? 2 nuns doing research on rape at Boston City Hospital. Anyway, that's a little backstory. So the issues in the 70s, underreporting of rape, they could report it but didn't get anywhere with it. Low charging, conviction, and all they wanted to do was focus on the victim's prior sexual history. Well, that was a big issue legally, and that had to be changed, and that was, so the Rape Shield Law came in by the time rape myths prevailed, and Henry de Bacon, back in the 13th century, had said, rape is a charge easily made, and so everyone would follow that. The prosecutors, very hard to get any kind of a charge through. It isn't any easier now, I can tell you that. But there have been some things over the 40 years that have helped. So how did I come in? One of the myths we had is we no longer have this, right? How many of you have been in a hospital where they had the little white cap and the little gown? Yeah. Oh, good, we got one. Excellent. But anyway, in those days, a nurse, I wanted to write the title of my book being Just a Nurse. I can't tell you how many times in the early days when I'd have to go in and testify, oh, you're just a nurse. You're not a psychiatrist. You're not a psychologist. You're not a social worker. You're just a nurse. And I'd have to say yes, and I'm a registered nurse, a real nurse. Anyway, I just wanted to, an era gone by, but I'm glad there's, maybe not totally. This is how we were starting to talk about what we were doing, Linda and I. This is at Boston College. And how did I get down there? Well, I got down there because legally, the head of the FBI was William Webster, new in, visionary, young, had been told he had to chart some new directions for the FBI. And so when he realized that the FBI Academy was the education arm, if you will, of the FBI. And so he put out this edict. When they put out an edict, you got to follow it. He said, everybody has to be doing research. So all of the agents had to scramble around and get a research topic. And 101, which was Roy Hazelwood, was the first person that I worked with. Roy Hazelwood. And he wanted to study autoerotic fatalities. And I said, what? What are autoerotic? Is that something to do with fatal car accidents? No. It was a type of sexual activity that I had to get quickly up to speed on because we had 109. He had 109 cases that we had to analyze. But anyway, so we did, when I say we, by this time Nick Roth was a psychologist, and I would take him down to the academy when we would lecture. They had asked me to come in and lecture. They had to also be studying rape investigation. This was a big departure. Up to that time, it was bank robbers and hostage negotiations. They never had done anything like rape. But the women had put pressure on Congress, and they had come up with the first prevention and control of rape. And so all of that was being set up. And they invited me down, and I can remember thinking, why would I want to go down and talk to a group of men on rape, especially FBI? So I really hesitated when I got the phone call from Roy Hazelwood. And they must teach them a certain way to make a phone call, because it was really scary when he said, my research assistant was standing in the doorway and said, Ann, you better take the call. And I said, why? And she says, the FBI. And all I could think of are my taxes. Did I not pay my taxes? I really had them all mixed up. But anyway, and so he gets on the phone, and this is a special agent, goes through the whole thing, and all of a sudden he says, did you just write an article on the rape victim in the emergency room? Then I thought, oh my gosh, something horrible I wrote in that, compromises the world or something. And it turned, and when I said, yes, I did, and he says, oh, good, and he relaxed, and he said, well, we'd like to invite you down to the FBI to give a lecture on that. And I thought, why? And then I thought, well, maybe I should. And I said to him, I want to hear what you're teaching them about rape. I'll be happy to come down. And so that's really how it starts. But it's always a test. When you're down there, it was always a test. Main test was, could you stand to look at the photos of the deceased victims? And horrible, they were really horrible cases. The person that I then started working with was Bob Ressler. And Ressler had picked John Douglas, to be his partner. They always worked in teams. And so when they realized that we had been able to do a fairly decent study on this autoerotic fatality, we actually had a book and papers out of it. He said, I need some help with my study on serial killers. And I said, what kind of help? I said, well, tell me what you're doing. He says, well, they go out on these road schools. And he says, if somebody's around, they ask to interview them. And I said, well, that's good. What do you talk to him about? Thinking he's going to tell me a list of, research questions and all of that. He said, I just get them talking. I said, oh, just get them talking. And what do they talk about? Anything. And I said, well, there's your mistake right there. I said, if you're going to do a research study, you better have a set clear, you've got to have what we call methodology that's going to, be able to pass the reviewer's test. So long story short, that's what we decided to do. And that's how I really got involved with the profiling study. Now, the book you have is on profiling. We did a first book, and that was on serial killers. And we just called it sexual homicide, because this was the type of case where they couldn't figure out motive. There was nothing there that would speak to motive. And so we looked at 36 serial killers and found out that the motive was sexual, even though there might not be any evidence, even though the victim may be totally clothed. I mean, Henry Walsh, you're going to see an interview with him. He would rape the victims, then make them dress, and then kill them. So, of course, that was how they ended up with all their clothes on, and that they didn't realize that was what was going on. So anyway, just to say how it starts with the test, and they really drill you to see if you're going to crack. And some of it was interesting, but some of it was a little bit hard. And so let me go the right way. So here's the group. Here are the profilers. There is Douglas Ressler. He was the unit chief. There's Ken Lanning. I speak with Ken a lot. He was expert with children. Here's Roy and Judd Ray and a couple others. But anyway, these were the 8, right? 2, 4, 6, 9, 8 that started. And as I've learned, I was really with them for about 3 generations of profilers. And there is something to be said for being trained by the best. And the best, of course, was Ressler. Douglas was the second best, but they would go into a table with all the photographs on it, and they would start with their questions back and forth, and they would come up with a profile in terms of age, gender, where they worked, were they married, and on and on. There were about 10 areas that they would do, and it was amazing how good they were. So we'll see a little bit of that, I hope. So here's the academy. Now, in that time, it's really nestled. It's much bigger now, but it's all nestled in this wooded area. Woods all along. Here's the highway, but it gave you, it's where they did all their training, and it had the BSU, the Behavioral Science Unit, which is really the important thing that I want to emphasize. And here I am at my first class. They're all in these little look-alike shirts, all these little names, and they're all sitting there very attentive when I ask, well, how do you investigate rape? Silence, of course. They're not going to say anything to me. Anyway, what I found interesting is poor Ressler, when this started to get out, and they are very, in case you haven't noticed, they're very secretive. They don't like to tell you anything. So when this started to get out, Webster caught wind of it, and they really needed Webster's approval. So he called Ressler in for a luncheon meeting and had him go over, and Ressler had said to me, what can I tell him? What are we doing? And so I gave him this profound answer. And he said, no, just in plain English. What are we doing? I got to talk to the director. And so what Webster said is, okay, we'll give you the green light, but no shoebox research. In other words, didn't want something that could just be put on a shelf and ignored, which a lot, unfortunately, research it happens to. So Ressler goes up. We said, how did it go, Bob? And he said, they charged me $7.63 for a sandwich I didn't even eat. Ressler. So here are the boys. Wait a minute, let me see. They come on one at a time. I think I have to do this. Yeah, there they are. Those are some of you may, I usually have my students have to identify them, but some of them, Bundy, Dahmer, Berkowitz, Ed Gein, Manson, right in the middle. Now, Manson never killed anybody, but yet he got charged with life. There's the one of the killed all the student nurses except one. Here's your Unabomber, who we'll talk about. We have his manifesto. And just to give you quick, 36 out of 36, they came from 20 state prisons. 7 killed one, but 29 killed multiple. We felt that there were 118 known victims from this 36, with 200 to 250 even suspected after that. I want to play this because you may not know that our work got picked up by Criminal Minds, and that's a show that was on earlier than, obviously, than Netflix. And this says it so well. Let me see if I can. Oh, no. What do I have to do? Oh dear, we're in trouble if I can't get this to work. What do I have to do? Do I have to hit that? It should go right in there.
Works? It's a tool. You can tell all about a guy from looking at the scene.
Well, the scene's only part of it. We also use victimology, precedent. We can usually get a fairly clear picture of the guy.
Our guys went over it pretty well.
I'm sure they did.
Local officers aren't trained to look for the things we look for.
What's that?
Hate, insecurity, fear, anger.
That's all it's seen?
It's all in his behavior.
You know anything about our guy yet?
Yeah. He isn't gonna stop until he's caught.
So true. You've got to get him. Anything. if anything I've learned is that they can't stop. That's why it's called serial. It's compulsive behavior that absolutely can't stop. So we hunted them. Our job was to study them, learn how they thought, ways to catch them, and as quickly as possible. So here's one of the crime scenes of John Jabay. I have him on interview too. And what's important here is the crime scene of his first, and that just shows you that the body was found in there. And this again shows you how far in. His second victim, which was 3 months later, was in the woods. And it was just snow had started. And so when Ressler went to look at it, they always go to the crime scene if they find out in time, is he realized that there were 2 sets of footprints going in and one coming out. Why did he do that? What does that tell you? That's a crime scene. Does that tell you anything? Yeah, but he's also the one that, remember, this was his first victim that we knew of. We later found out others, where he just kind of what they call dumped at the side of the road. So he had learned between the first and the second, take your victim in, kill him in there, and then it's a better place to hide him, kind of thing. So that's one of the things. Now, how they got to that thought, they came at it from different ways when they were doing the profile of this. This was the case out of Nebraska that really had community, as you can imagine, really, really upset. These were young 12-year-old school newspaper boys and being killed. And as you can imagine, everybody's really, really scared. So they did get him because they did a media blitz to say as much as they could about from the profile. And Ressler had done such a good job, it eventually ended up in the Congressional Record. But at any rate, they had tell the media, everybody obviously in the media, that this one day, a woman really got suspicious for this car that was kind of circling, and she tried to stop him and say, "Are you looking for someone?" And he got really, really angry at her and said, I think to the point of, "I could kill you," really got her concerned. She got most of the license plate, missing 1 digit, but that was easy for them to run with just 1 missing digit. Found out it was a rental car, got hold of that, and then found out where his car was, which was in the shop being fixed or something. And that's how they caught him. And that is John Jabay. There he is. Does he look like a serial killer? Looks pretty young too, doesn't he? And he needed to really cause others pain. You're going to hear him. And his methods of provoking suffering in others, he really found what we call a parasitic way of feeling the emotions he had long been denied. So, what do we learn? For an offender, fantasy is reality. Its private, powerful existence follows its own rules. And here he is on.
So after this is over, you stopped by McDonald's.
Yes.
This was early in the morning.
Early Sunday morning, yes.
Yeah, you had blood on your hands there. Did anybody notice you at all or spot you?
I didn't really have blood on my hands. I was wearing gloves.
You didn't know that.
But you went in to wash your hands.
Well, yes.
And you stayed at McDonald's for a while.
Yes.
Had breakfast.
Yes.
So evidently it didn't bother you that much what had happened.
No, I hadn't thought about it really.
What happened when you got back to the barracks?
I went to sleep. Yes, and the prosecution made a big deal out of that too. The coldness of being able to kill someone and eat breakfast and then go right to sleep.
What do you think? Was it cold? Absolutely. Was he aware of it? Absolutely. You think he'd kill again? Absolutely. And he said that. He said, "I cannot guarantee I won't kill again." So, did he look like a serial killer, though? Would you pick him out? He was an airman. Ressler's profile was so good. The only thing he missed on is he said he'd be an E3, and he was really an E4 airman. I don't know the difference, but anyway, that's how close he was. And he said he'd be at Offutt Air Base, and he was. He would work the night shift and then come out and kill. And he went out, he said he'd go out as many nights as he could. So we learned a lot from him. There was a female killer case. Well, we didn't know that at the time, but it was a young high school student killed out in California. And we had never done a female. It always was male cases, male offenders. And so worked this case, it's in the book, and it was another teen, and it was over jealousy, possibly other things, but at any rate, that's as much as we were able to find out. She had passed the polygraph. They had brought in all the possible suspects, and she passed. Why did she pass? They put her back through again with a polygrapher that had spent some time establishing a relationship, getting her trust, and then at one point said, I know you did it. And she said, I did. So he had really put her into a point where she was able to finally say, but she had evaded this. She was another high school student. Nobody had suspected. It was a sorority kind of thing. You'd have to read the book, but anyway, it's... So we obviously worked a female case. Though they had ignored this little 7-year-old. This was an awful case of 2 little girls on Mother's Day out riding their bikes. And this mother had said, when I talked to her, she said it was the first time she had let her daughter ride her bike. And the 2 of them were riding the bike, and this car stopped to ask directions, like, where is it to town? And in the time it took for him to get over to the girls and get out of the car, he was able to grab little Missy. Picked her up, Opal. She picked up Opal first, threw her back into the car, and then went after little Missy. And in that time, Opal wanted to get out of the car, and she realized there was no handle. So he had made the car so he could get victims. Later turned out to be a serial offender. But at any rate, so she's able to get out, runs and hides, and her last, as she said to me, my last memory of Missy is she's in the back window saying, help, help, and waving her hands. That must have been horrible for her. But at any rate, the case got reported, and everybody was out looking for Missy, as you would expect. Nobody was paying any attention to little Opal. So they flew me in because they didn't have anybody that had worked with children, child victims. And I had from Boston City, and flew in, and I worked with one of the other female agents. And we did an interview with drawings. And you can see in the book, the drawings are in the book. But she was able to give a very good description of the car, the inside of the car, and the kidnapper. And she said he had these hairs on his chest, on his chin. So what did that tell us? This was a weekend. He probably was on a drunk and wasn't shaving, wasn't doing whatever. And sure enough, he had a victim prior that weekend. So anyway, here is what I like to point out here in the drawing is that she's able to draw people and so forth until she gets to what actually happened. And then she goes to words. And she writes the words in. It's really, really interesting. You can say, get out of the car. That's what he says to her first. Get me. He got to me. There's the 2 little bicycles. There's the guy with the hair on his chin. And we got enough information. They did a very good, pretty good composite to then circulate. However, they didn't call me until day 10. I was really so annoyed that we could have gotten this maybe much, much earlier and maybe even find Missy before she was murdered. So my point here is kids can give good the detail. I did another case for the Bureau on out of Texas, and the boy was about 9, and he really had witnessed somebody come up behind his mother who was at the sink cleaning dishes and choke her. And he was able to draw that. And what he had drawn is I put the drawing in the report that I sent in, and I got immediate phone calls saying, "Have you seen a picture of the father?" And I said, "No." And he sent me a picture of the father, and he had really drawn the father from the back because he was bald and it was amazing. And I thought we were going to go to trial with that. We were certainly sure that the father had done it. He was a minister down in Texas, a big Baptist church. But anyway, the prosecutor refused. He says, "I'm not putting an 8-year-old on the stand. They won't believe him." And I said, "Well, just put his picture on. How about what he drew?" Anyway, they didn't, and they didn't get him. So he got away with murder. She got away with attempted murder. He never added, he made it so awful it had brain anoxia, and she was in a nursing home for years. But anyway, so the important point is that children can give information. Victimology 101, I want to go a little bit faster here. That's very, very important. I think let's see if we can see. This is our serial killer, Barry John Simonis. I went down with the agents. They interviewed him. I interviewed some of the victims. If he hadn't killed, he was very close to it. He had numerous victims. Let me see. Yeah, how good. No, not good.
Barry, what are you incarcerated for? What are you in prison for?
For a series of armed robberies and rapes.
Mm-hmm. And what is the total of those combined?
As far as numbers of the robberies and rapes? Totally, I think we estimated got a figure about 140.
140 robberies and rapes.
And burglaries combined.
And burglaries.
Yes.
And how many of those involved rapes specifically?
Just rapes is probably about between, I think, I computed about 45 or 50. Actual assaults, sexual assaults, probably get a little high, anywhere between 60 and 75.
What he did also, he was a respiratory therapist in the hospital, and he would get the keys from the patients, make copies, and then go back and rape them later on. So he was a really very evil person. There's no cookbook. I'm going to go to Monty Rissell. He's one of our...
I can't to this day honestly tell you why I did it, except that it was something that was just in my mind that I don't know if it was another cry for help. You know what I'm saying? Basically that's what it was. I didn't know it at the time, but I mean, there was an adrenaline rush and a power trip control. You know what I'm saying? Just to be able to take another person and dominate them and control them. And I guess I had felt like I had been that way for the last 3 or 4 years of my life, with not having a strong figure in my life, a male figure, but people in school, teachers and principals and things of that nature.
Did you when you went into this situation, you concealed your face, right?
Yeah.
What did you wear, a stocking or?
No, I had a towel.
Towel?
I didn't even know what I was going to do. I just, when I climbed up the balcony, I don't think I even had that intention.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But it was more or less maybe to just break in and rob something or steal something. And I heard her say something. I was in the bathroom looking through the medicine cabinet, and I'd heard her say something, and like, who is it, or who's out there, right? And I guess the adrenaline just kicked in, being scared and everything, and then hearing that she was probably more scared than I was, and I put the towel over my face and told her not to holler or scream or yell or anything, that I wasn't going to hurt her, right? I was just in there, I was going to rob her, right? And I walked into the bedroom and she was in her bed, and it was dark, but the moon was shining in through the light, and just hearing the fear in her voice and not knowing what was going on, and it was like an adrenaline rush.
You had a knife, didn't you?
Yeah.
Did you take it from the house or did you bring it?
No, I had it when I went back to the kitchen. Right? I got it out of her kitchen drawer.
Kitchen, right there. So Did you have any kind of a fantasy about this, that, if you moved on this, that you would comply and become a compliant partner? Is that something that you might?
Yeah, I'm going to stop there. He had 12 rapes that we were able to find before he had his first murder. And then he had 5 murders. He was 19 years old. 19 years old. And blamed everybody. Didn't have a strong father, right? Blamed the judge that had put him in some kind of rehab. And so everybody got blamed, right? But he finally, he does talk, and he gives you some. Do you believe him? Do you think he's, how do you think you going to believe him? How many say yes? How many say no? Like my students, not going to say. Okay. Here's Kemper. Everybody knows Kemper. Look, the size of him was a lot. He's so.
So I'm trying to remember this from a long time ago, but another round had entered and exited that padding area. So there were 3 holes in that padding area that was head level with her. It was off to her right, to my left. She was moving about in the back quadrant there, trying to avoid the shots. That wouldn't have happened. I realize if I'd never done it, it wouldn't have happened. But my original intention was to make it very quick and neither one of them to be aware of what was happening. And it was not to keep them from stopping the crime. It was to keep them from suffering. I had a real bad problem depriving people of their lives. It wasn't the aspect of killing them. That was the aspect of possessing their bodies afterwards. So it was almost after an effect, evicting someone from their human body. And I'm sorry it sounds so cold, but that's about what it analogizes to.
What do you think? He's preventing suffering. That's his logic, right? Let's see. Here, I have one clip from Netflix on Kemper. See what you think. I thought this was pretty good. We'll do it real quick. This is how they.
I'm sorry, Ed. Do you mean that violence in the movies drove you to kill those women?
No. My point is, in reality, it doesn't work the way you expect. When you stab somebody, they're supposed to fall dead. They go, whoa, they fall dead, right?
Right.
In reality, when you stab somebody, they lose blood pressure and they leak to death very slowly. So I was reluctant. I didn't enjoy it. Did you get that on tape?
Yeah.
You know, it all really goes back to my perceived inability to communicate socially, sexually. I was scared to death of failing in male-female relationships, even sitting down to talk to a young lady. I wanted to communicate. Ironically enough, that's why I began picking people up. I pick a girl up, and I'm going a little further each time. It's a daring kind of a thing. Like first there wasn't a gun. Then I'm driving along. We go to a vulnerable place where there aren't people watching, but I say, no, I can't.
So you picked up women but didn't kill them?
But then a gun is in the car, and this craving, this awful raging eating feeling is inside me. I would have loved to have just raped them, but not having any experience at all. I could feel it consuming my insides, this fantastic passion.
Fantastic passion.
It's a good phrase, no?
Then what happens?
You know, I'm thinking of writing my own book. I've been trying to get a typewriter. Maybe help me with that.
I'm sure we could pull some strings.
Then it builds the feeling?
And at some point you begin to enjoy the thrill.
Look, when you slit a person's throat, you need to cut it from ear to ear in order to sever the windpipe and the jugular so that they bleed and suffocate at the same time. Otherwise, they'll just be in a great deal of pain. That's how I learned the term ear to ear, literally.
Stop there. What do you think? That's Kemper. That comes from the interviews. Believe him? Okay, here's the Berkowitz that is communicating with the media. we found this to be really, really important, and certainly in our AI work does, but he would always write and watch in the afterwards. Here is Dennis Rader. And what was so impressive about him is his daughter has written a book, and I've actually been on a blog with her, and she tells quite a story about what it's like to have your father be a serial killer that you didn't know at the time, and she's very instructive. It evidently kept the two parts of their life, which most of them will talk about, very, very separate. And then there's Ted Kaczynski. I put him on because he's in our manifesto study. And I also would get the killers to draw. And this is Henry Wallace. There he is. He killed her with a rock. Try to figure out how it did. And it really draws exactly what he did. And the monster within. I think I've got him on. Let's see if we can.
Do you understand any of this any better since you had a chance to kind of reflect on it? How do you understand it? Why?
Well, I feel that within this shell there are two people. One person being a chameleon. He will adapt to anything, any environment, any situation, and he's a very well respected, very well liked person, and very well trusted person. He almost lures the women in for the other person and protects the other person. And
yeah, Henry. Everybody liked Henry. He was in the high school. He was a cheerleader. His mother didn't want him to play football because he might hurt himself, so she let him be a cheerleader. He goes on and joins the Navy. Does very well. All kinds of letters were in his file. So people liked him. He is a good psychopath. You know, he's charming, so forth. But he also does what a lot of them do. There's two sides to me. You know, there's this bad Henry, and then there's the good Henry. So I just wanted to show you that a little bit, and then I want to get into the. You want to hear Gacy? Gacy is
have no time
quite
for
different.
that. Ken, one thing that's been brought up is that when you were in Las Vegas, that you worked in a funeral parlor, actually a mortuary. Is this correct?
When I first got out to Las Vegas, the first couple of days I went to gambling casinos. It was 103 degrees. I passed out, and I was taken to the Southern Nevada Hospital. After being released from there, they gave me a bill for $27 by an ambulance company called Mercy Ambulance Company. I immediately went over to Mercy Ambulance Company and told them that I could not afford their bill because I didn't have no money. I think the ambulance bill was $36. So Bud Bishop gave me a job there. I could wash ambulances and work around the place.
There's a mortuary, right?
No. Huh? Ambulance service.
Ambulance.
That again, see that's when you listen to the media.
But did you not work for the mortuary?
Okay, so eventually I.
Yeah, I wanted you to see that. He had a stack, his file, because he took back and he said, I never killed those boys. And never, none of that's true. And he had a file that he would carry around with him. He also had stationery from I've got letters that he's on stationery from the prison. He had his own, John Wayne Gacy, post office box or whatever. So he really worked the system. So I wanted you to see that because everybody said he slept with the bodies, which he makes it very clear, if you want to believe him, that he did not. He slept in the house where it was, but not with them, right? So anyway, what became the next step to explore the criminal mind? Before they act, who they are, what they write, and that's where we get into the manifestos. Yeah. Just a quick history. Machine learning dates back to the 30s, and that's when Alan Turing went to the government and cipher school in Bletchley Park, England. It's a wonderful place to go to if you are in England. And in 1936, he wrote an article on computable numbers, and he said a universal machine could simulate the behavior of any specific machine. That's back in the 30s. In the 50s, he wrote Computing Machinery and Intelligence and raised the question of how far a machine could go. Can computers think? Now that's how far back it goes. So move on to natural language processing, which is what we're into, and it's that branch of computer science, a branch of AI, artificial intelligence, that gives computers the ability to understand text and spoken words in the same way that humans can. And it's rule-based modeling of human language, and together these technologies of statistics, machine learning, and deep learning models that can move you, at least has moved us, into the research area. Now, the analysis of language is in lots of fields. You don't realize it. Just how they get you to know what you're interested in. It's all of that stuff. And then we have thinking drives behavior, and that's what I kept going back to. We were doing the behavior at the crime scenes, but we had to get into the thinking. How do you get into their heads? And that's where we started this whole forensic linguistics, which is a subdivision of forensic science that tries to look at the application of language in the context of a crime. So our next step was to get interested in studying incels. How many know what incels are? I'd better do a quick, and there is Elliot Rogers. We did his one first, but back in 97, there were no such things. It started with a female. Everybody thinks of incels as male, but it started with a female who said she was lonely, she was a late bloomer, and so she started this little website called Alana's Involuntary Celibacy Project for those who are struggling to form loving relationships. And she said it was just a friendly place, a simple website where you could put your name. And it became a forum for men and women to talk about being lonely. Now, some of the men got pretty clueless about how women are unique individual humans, but in general, it was a supportive place. She said one couple even met on the site and got married. But she wanted to abbreviate involuntary celibacy as a mouthful. So she went to incels, but that's hard to say. So it got cut down to incels. And this is really important because I think many of the serial killers that we studied were incels. They are very angry at women. They're misogynist. They also have, even Ted Kaczynski said that he was sexually starved. Now, Ted had tried to get a woman to come live with him in his little house in the woods with no electricity, no running water, and nobody answered his ads. So, I mean, you got to read this. Anyway, so 15 years later, Alana's in the bookstore, and she reads this small story about a man named Elliot Rogers. How many know who Elliot Rogers is? Well, he's really the start. He was 22 years old. He killed 6 people, and it really was kind of the start. He has become this persona. They worship him in the incel group. He shot his 3 roommates. Then he went to a sorority house, tried to get in, wasn't let in, but started shooting girls on the street. But before he died, he gave a 141-page document exploring his deep-rooted loathing of women fueled by an intense frustration over his virginity. And he became a hero to the incels. Then in 2018, you had this horrible man from Toronto, Alec Minassian, who wrote on the Facebook, "The incel rebellion has already begun. All hail the supreme gentleman, Elliot Roger." He went down the street. He's the one that went with the car and went into a crowded street, killing 10 people. So that's where we started. So we said, if we looked at 23 manifestos, put them into the machine. I'm going to show you just what comes out in less than a minute. Less than a minute. Now, Kaczynski's was 17 pages, thousands of words. These others were very large. Some were small, but some were large, and in less than a minute. That's how we got it. So we did a proof of concept paper. We got the 23 manifestos, and this is what I'm going to give you different schematics of what comes out. This is where you have only 15 lines. This is where you have 100. And it comes into all of these words now get put out. This is a little easier to see. This is your topics. And what we're probably going to do is to go to the first 5. But you get an idea of all of these manifestos and the key words that come out. Some have technology, some have the racial issue, white, black, supremacist, attack, gun, etc. Here's another way that you can do it, looking at the various levels, but look at how hate on both of them, very hard. Scientists, fear, death, Jews, attack, Jews, twice, happy, happiness, freedom, hate. On this side, what we were interested in is the fertility issue. That's the first time we had seen that, and we wonder whether that has to do with the perpetuation of the human race, whatever. But what this does, here again is the topics. Here's how they cluster together, and all of these can get interpreted with what you put into the machine. A heat map, this will show you what is connected with what. It's another way of looking at it. So why is it an advantage? Speed. Incredible speed that you can do this in. And we think it addresses bias. Now, I don't know if you ever get away from bias, because maybe, I don't know if they'll say the machine is biased, but certainly could some of the material you're putting in. We don't know. That's going to be one we're going to have to handle. And then it identifies implicit topics. So we analyze these 23 manifestos and built a measurement model for what's called, you can have unsupervised or supervised analysis. So you have a choice between that. And this is where we're at. Now, this is, again, only for violence. This is where you start here. Every act of violence is going to have a grievance. That starts behind it. Then you get up to the violent ideation. That would be the second step. Get into how do they do the research and the planning. What's the preparation? This is all building up. I mean, you can even look at the current Israel problem, and all of this it will be broken down. Probing and breaching, and then there's the attack. And then another way that is kind of, it's said a little different way. And then our work, we never think that you can do this alone. You've got to do the clinical interview to get the human aspect to it. But this is going to put output for what questions to ask. I think we're not asking the right questions. And so this may give us a window into that. Because the kinds of things that I could tell you that we're finding, it's, gee, why didn't they ask about this? Maybe you would have learned something on that. So the interview questions. And then this is, of course, the goal. This is our, how do you, what is the low risk of terrorist attacks? What's guarded? What's elevated, high, and severe? And the reason, I'll just say in closing, the reason this is so important is you probably don't realize how many threats come in to police stations that they don't even have time to read, let alone get analyzed. The FBI, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll send, at least the way it works in Boston is your local police station will get a threat. They'll say, send it to the FBI. Is this we know what level risk is this? And they don't have the time or the manpower or the person power to really do any of this. So if there's some way that we're trying to get towards, our next step will be to analyze some of these and see whether there would be a way to classify them as to low, guarded, elevated, high, and severe. So that is kind of where we're at. I know that it's probably raises more questions than answers, but that's where our little group is, to try to get a handle on crime and risk, because it's just getting worse. I don't see any signs that it's going to get better, and look at the world, I don't think it is. So I'm happy to take questions if you want. Anybody have any questions?
Raise your hand and Brooke will come around with the microphone.
There we go.
I actually have 2 questions.
Okay.
Unbelievably good. But I'm sitting here thinking, having been in the medical field more of my life, what in the world do you do for relaxation? I couldn't sleep at night with this kind of stuff. And the second thing is there some way to screen before the fact?
Yes.
That's what I'd be most interested in.
Absolutely. That we have to do We've got to get when those red flags, that's would be the goal, is if we can get a bank of these kinds of threats and then feed them in, one compared to all of them. That's what we did with Rogers. We took one and then compared it to the 23. But we have to. I mean, I don't know any other way. What do I do for fun? I come to Lake Manola. I visit my cousins. Thank you.
Do some of these people want to be helped? Feel that you don't find anyone who does?
Well, no, that's a super question. We have that as one of our projects. Is I want to go. A couple of my failures are on death row, right? So I want to go and find out, is there something that could have been done earlier? As I said to him, then you might not be here. You might be in for life, but you might not be in for death. So we have to find out of where do we fail. Kemper never was caught. He had to go and turn himself in. That's how good he was. Can you believe that? And he had killed his grandparents. He had killed his mother. He had killed 8 co-eds.
Was he proud of it?
And proud of it, yeah. And proud of it. Well, I'm not sure he would say that. He's still alive, and we have somebody talking to him, but he can't stop it. He can't stop it. That's the problem. So that would be something else. But thank you for your
medication.
So have you ever had any cases that you looked at where the suspect tried covering up the crime? And if so, how did you approach that situation?
I have somebody who's retired FBI come into my class and talk to students, and that's kind of what he says is, how do you get to move from an interview to an interrogation when you think you've got somebody that has actually committed the crime? And he has several ways that he does it. He says, and it's establishing the relationship, getting them to trust you, and then somehow kind of weaving it to, like with Henry Wallace, tell us what you did, and he just gave him a piece of paper and he put out 12 names. They didn't even know 2 of them. Police hadn't even thought of him for 2 of them. So what that tells me is there is not that they want to be caught, but they aren't going to fight it. The only one that really fought it was Gacy. That's why I like to play his interview, because he really would fight it. But you have to be able to get to them, and it's almost like, what do you need to stop? Would be one approach. But don't forget, that's not going to get you a trial. You've got to get evidence. So even if they confess, doesn't necessarily mean it. There's going to be an interview with someone who says he killed John Benet Ramsey this Sunday on the interview room. I'm going to be on it. I'm interested to see this person. He says he killed her accidentally. That's okay. Let's listen to him, and we're going to see if the DNA matches. But it's going to be interesting to hear him, because is he just getting on? You always have people that come out of the woodwork, so to speak, when you have a whodunit. But we'll see. If anyone remembers that case, that goes back 30 years. But thank you.
Dr. Burgess, I have about 50 questions, but I won't.
Okay.
I won't take up the time. A couple things. I work for the district attorney's office. I've been there about 25 years, so usually go to homicide scenes, work with the families, and all of that. However, in this area, we don't focus much on victimology.
Oh.
So.
Not good. Gotta fix victimology.
I mean, they're keyed in on what on the defendant only or potential person only. Do you have any suggestions of?
Yeah, because we had to get that across to the agents, and the agents are so clear that victimology is the first thing. Watch any of the crime shows if they've had good consult.
Maybe we could hire you to come back and talk on that topic.
Well, that's all you have in a murder is your victim. So I don't know why. Just ask them questions. What do they know about her? There's textbooks are written on it. And why can't they answer the questions? They've got to get into that. That's going to give them the direction.
I agree. Also, I saw that you and Dr. Bricado are doing a study on death by asphyxiation, correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us anything about that?
We're doing a couple of studies.
Are
What
you-
was it again?
On asphyxiation?
Oh, that paper, we published one. I was just telling them, the research question was, does it make a difference if the victim is killed by manually or ligature?
Okay.
And that showed some differences that would be good for profiling. So the asphyxiation there's going to be 2 more papers coming out of that. Yeah, send me just email me and I'll
Okay,
get you
great.
the papers.
Thank you
in the
very much.
video. We also have a very interesting paper that is now coming out in December on male long-term consequences of males who are athletes as freshmen and sophomores in a very large university in the Midwest.
Wow.
And they were given what we call a misconduct exam. And we have followed them for 30, 40 years.
Oh my gosh.
They're in their 60s and 70s when we interviewed them.
And when is that coming out?
Oh, that will be out. I can get you that paper. We have
Thank
2
you.
other papers coming out on that. And we're using machine learning on we had some of them that wrote some. It was a legal case. They settled for millions of dollars. And we happened to be able to be one of the groups that interviewed 46 of them. It's a very powerful for the importance of trauma on young males, adolescent males, and especially where it's not called rape. It's called, but they had an exam that was unbelievable. All of them, and they never said anything. Or if they said something, the athlete department said, "Oh, be a man.
Right.
Suck it up and be a man."
Any words on Brian Koberger? I hope at some point you get to talk to him. But your profiling with Dr. Bricado prior to his arrest was spot on. In the Idaho murder case?
Oh, the Idaho case. Yeah, he might get out of it. Got to be careful with that case. It's going to be on process. It's going to be on DNA. But that's right here in your state.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not far.
Yeah. Watch that case. And the Delphi murders. Very important case to watch. Do you believe they got the right guy? No, I don't either. No, I don't either. I think it's awful. But they're going to go to trial.
Doctor,
Had one. There was another trail murder in Maryland, in Bel Air, that we're watching, and they got DNA from California. This familial DNA is going to really open up things. So forensics, I just say to the university here, get your forensic science course up, because there's that's opening up a lot of these cases, a lot of the old cases, cold cases. Yes.
Doctor, how early in life do you think these characteristics can be identified so that there can be therapeutic intervention? Can it be done in elementary school, early adolescence? So when we look at some of these mass murders or these committed by teenagers, are there clues before this happens?
Oh, yes, the red flag, absolutely. I mean, we know so much more than we knew 30 years ago, and we're saying you've got to get these young boys that are in 12, 13, 14 at the time. Yeah, some of the red flags that are out of it. The other thing is what they're using for pornography. They all are into pornography, but you have to find out what type. Nobody asks that. They just say, "Oh, you're into pornography." That's not enough. Henry Wallace used detective magazines for his pornography, and Bob Ressler brought in 12 detective magazines and went through each of them. We have them on tape, where he would tell us exactly what it was about the picture that was exciting to him. So that you can really find out so much more.
Is there any
That's a
effort
good
to
question, is
this?
can we get this working? That will be helpful too.
Oh. Is there any effort anywhere to start programs like this?
Programs like,
to intervene
University of
at an
Scranton
early level.
should have a program. Put the pressure on the university, right? Yeah, no, I think I can just tell you, Loyola University in Baltimore has had such an increase in their forensic program. They are getting a new building. They have doubled their enrollment. They're working with Baltimore crime labs. They're making wonderful relationships so that the cases, the students will learn. The other thing, that's what I would encourage. In Scranton, you must have a good relationship with crime labs or whatever, so you could do that. That's what I'd encourage.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have.
Yeah. Happy to take questions individually, but thank you all.
Dr. Burgess was kind enough to bring books as well, so if you'd like one, she's giving them away.
Yeah, my publisher said, here, have them. You're going to do a speech. So please enjoy.